the waters to part. He threw back the waters in heaven to make the sky, and the waters on the earth drew back, leaving the first dry land, which steamed and sparkled in the first light. Now this new land was empty and bare, so God decided to fill it with life. Out of the earth came bushes and flowers and beautiful plants of all kinds. Grasses sprang up and raced across the ground, and trees, pushing up through this new green turf, were covered all at once with leaves and blossom and heavy fruit. The air was filled with the most gorgeous scent as everything burst into flower. From up above, in the daytime sky, God brightened every color of this new life with a golden sun. Then, through the dark hours of the night that followed, the new moon cast silver shadows upon the ground. The next day, God looked to the empty waters on the earth, and right away he filled them with teeming life. In the turn of every wave, fish shone in great gleaming shoals. Turtles paddled, and rays swam. Dolphins leaped and dived. Tiny crabs, shrimps, and seahorses played in the shallows. And whales, heaving their mighty bodies up from the depths, crashed their tails onto the waves, throwing up showers of spray into the air. And suddenly the air itself was filled with movement and life. Seagulls swooped, and ospreys wheeled over the shining water. Albatrosses soared above the curling waves, and puffins and terns plunged from the cliffs into the tumbling surf. Over the land, too, from the tiny hummingbirds to the huge eagles that spiraled up and up almost into heaven, birds of every kind now fluttered and hovered, dived and flew, climbed and plummeted, and the air was filled with the first wild music of their song. Below them, on the ground, amongst the trees and the flowers, new life began to stir. Ants scurried busily in the leaves. Rabbits and hares played in the grass. Lions and leopards stretched out and snoozed in the delightful warmth of the sun. The first bees began their urgent journeys from flower to flower. Monkeys romped in the trees. The deer and the antelope took their first dainty steps. Snakes slithered, frogs hopped, and butterflies fluttered and glittered like jewels. Great bears scratched and yawned. Gorillas beat their chests, and mighty buffaloes barged and blundered their way through the undergrowth. From the smallest insects to the mightiest elephants, the animals tried out their new voices. They chirruped and chattered, they barked and snorted, they bellowed and trumpeted. And their great uproar joined with the clamor of all the singing birds and rumbled up into heaven. Adam and Eve. God the Creator was delighted with the earth and all the new life in it, but there was one thing missing. Among all the living creatures he had made, there was not one that resembled God himself. Now, from time to time, the waters that he had thrown back in heaven he let fall onto the earth as rain. This rain mixed with the fine dust of the ground to make a rich clay. God took a piece of this clay, and he molded it into a shape that pleased him, the body of a man. God breathed into the man's mouth, and instantly he sprang to life in God's hands. God named him Adam. Of all the things God had made, he loved Adam the most. And since Adam was, of all the animals, the one who was most like God, he made Adam the master of all living things, and he let him name everything else, just as he liked. So that he should not be alone, while Adam slept, God took one of his ribs, and from it he made the first woman, whom he named Eve. When Adam woke, He was delighted with his beautiful friend, and he praised God and thanked him. 6 days it took God to make the world, and on the 7th he rested and looked with satisfaction at all he had done. In this lovely new world, God decided to make for Adam and Eve an even more special place, a beautiful garden, a paradise, where all the animals would live in peace, and where Adam and Eve would be free to live in blissful happiness. It was called the Garden of Eden. In Eden, there would be no cares or worries, only joy, for every tree was so laden with fruit that no one need ever know hunger. In the middle of the garden, God placed one special tree, which he called the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God said to Adam and Eve, "My children, I have given you everything you need. Eat freely of all the fruits that you can find. But the fruit of this one tree alone, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, this you must not eat. Promise me." Adam and Eve promised that they would not eat the fruit of this tree, and so paradise was theirs. Just like the animals, Adam and Eve went naked without any shame and without hurt, for the air was warm and balmy. In Eden there were no thorns to prick them, and no nettles to sting. They lived in a world filled with the delicious scent of flowers and the sweet songs of birds. God loved them, and sometimes he would visit the garden and speak with them, and the sound of his voice was like music in their hearts. When they were hungry, they ate the fruit of the trees, and all the animals in Eden were their friends. Or, so they thought. There was one animal, the cleverest of them all, the snake, who was filled with jealousy. Why? Was he jealous of God's power, or was he jealous of the special love that he showed to Adam and Eve? Or was he jealous of the love and praise that Eve and Adam gave to God? Who can really tell? But whatever the reason may have been, the snake was determined to come between God and his beloved children, and he thought he knew just how to do it. One day, as Eve walked alone in the garden, she heard a soft voice calling her. "Eve, Eve." She looked around but saw no one. She knew it was not Adam who had called her, and it was certainly not the voice of God. Then she saw that on the branch of a tree, twining and looping his gleaming coils, lay the snake. His forked tongue flicked delicately out of his mouth, and he looked into the air as if he was thinking aloud. "Ah, there is Eve, daughter of God, beloved of Adam, most beautiful of all the creatures in the garden. How happy she thinks she is." Eve smiled and said, "Yes, here I am. You too are beautiful." At this, the snake started, as if surprised that she should have noticed him. Then he slid gracefully down the branch until he hung beside her. Eve held out her hand, and the snake twined his long body around her arm and slid gently up until he lay in a shining loop on her shoulder. "Will you eat with me, Eve?" said the serpent. "Why, yes," she replied. A vine, which hung down from the tree, was laden with clusters of grapes, but the snake turned up his nose at these. They went to another tree, on which ripe figs hung thick on every bough, but the snake shook his jeweled head. Eve laughed. This was a new game. From tree to tree they went, but the fruit of none of them would please the snake. At last they came to the center of the garden, and stood before the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Said the snake, "Now here is fruit worthy of our feast." "Oh, no," said Eve, "the fruit of this tree is forbidden." "By whom?" "By God." "But does not God love you?" asked the snake. "Yes, yes," replied Eve. "Then if he loves you so much, why does he forbid you anything?" Eve could think of no reply. The snake rested his head against her cheek and whispered into her ear, "God does not love you. He fears you. If you eat the fruit of this tree, you will know everything that he knows." From her shoulder he slid into the branches of the tree, and with his sharp